Nearly 2 years ago, I made a video compiling a list of songs and albums that I personally enjoy, but were hated amongst many. And I believe in the initial video I teased that I would make a sequel to that video. Well, here it is, nearly 2 years later. I've gotten into several artists since then, and I believe that I have a decent amount of albums and songs that I've listened to since then, or have forgotten to include in the initial video, that I feel like discussing here and making a case for, because a lot of the songs and albums here that I'm going to discuss in this video, I feel get way too much hate. Jesus Christ. And if you personally don't enjoy some of the songs and albums that I'm going to discuss here, fine, whatever. I'll respect your opinion as long as you respect mine. And this video isn't meant to shame anyone who personally don't enjoy any of the songs or albums that I'm going to discuss here. Maybe there'll be some, oh my god, I can't believe people don't enjoy this song or album, or, oh my god, these people are crazy for not enjoying this song or album, but I don't mean it in bad faith, okay? If you genuinely don't like any of the songs or albums that I'm going to discuss here, that is perfectly fine. I don't care. Music is music, and music is subjective. And plus, you probably won't know a lot of the albums and songs I'm going to discuss here, but maybe you'll know quite a few of them, or maybe even all of them. I'll be genuinely surprised if you do. Anyway, let's finally dive into the video, shall we? Hot Dog by Led Zeppelin off their 1979 album In Through the Outdoor, which would ultimately be their final studio album comprised of original material due to the death of their drummer John Bonham the following year. Anyways, I personally always really enjoyed Hot Dog. It's a fun, catchy song, but so many people write it off as either one of the worst or the absolute worst Led Zeppelin song. I so meant to include this in the original video, but like a dumbass, I forgot, so I'm going to make a case for it here. I personally believe the song, like I said, is very catchy and fun. It's a nice throwback to 50s rock, and again, like I said, it's a really fun song. Is it my favorite off Into the Outdoor? Hell no. I personally believe it is the weakest song off Into the Outdoor, but I don't absolutely despise it like so many other Led Zeppelin fans seem to. It's not a blemish on the album, but when you compare it to songs like In the Evening or Carousel Lombro or All of My Love or I'm Gonna Crawl, songs like those that are just fucking fantastic songs, it just doesn't compare. Absolutely not. It doesn't even compare to some of the more meh songs like Southbound Surrey or Fool in the Rain. But for what it is, I'll take it. If I were a dancer and gave a shit at all about dancing, I would totally get down on the dance floor and dance to this, because that honestly sounds kind of fun. Shangri-La-Di-Da by Stone Temple Pilots, which is probably the stupidest album name I have ever heard in my life, but that aside, I think this is a fantastic album that gets shafted way too much. A lot of people say this doesn't compare to the first four Stone Temple Pilots albums. There was a big decline in between number 4 and this album, and I would heavily disagree with that. I truly believe that this is better than albums like Tiny Music or Number 4 or their comeback album, but most people don't like the comeback album, so whatever. I'm not really gonna compare it to that, because I think I'd be preaching to the choir when I say this is better. Anyway, a lot of people really don't like the mellower sound of this album, and I was in that camp for a brief period back in 2016 when I decided to check out Stone Temple Pilots' discography after the untimely death of their frontman / vocalist Scott Weiland. I checked out this album and hated it initially. I hated the slower, more ballady type songs of this album, but as I listened to this album more and more, I came to really love it. It's a very mature, reflective album. Scott's lyrics in this album deal with divorce, the birth of his son, and drug use, which a lot of Stone Temple Pilots songs are about drugs, but I get a sense of regret more so in this album than the previous albums, which ultimately that regret led to nothing, because Scott Weiland ultimately died of a drug overdose eventually. But that aside, Days of the Week is a pretty good example of this. It was the lead single off of this album, and a very hated song, I should add, which also is a song that gets a lot of flack. I love the fuck out of that song. It's catchy, it's fun, but I'm not going to spend too much time on that. The song is basically about Scott's time in jail after caught possessing heroin, I believe, and it was basically him reflecting on all the time he wasted pretty much in jail and how much he was reflecting on his addiction at the time because all that time he spent in jail could have been time he spent with his wife, his kids, and that's pretty much. It's not exactly what the song is about, but it's pretty much about all the time that has passed during his time in jail. I believe he spent around a month in jail once, and I believe that's what the song was referencing. And it's also pretty much about Scott leaving jail, being let out of jail, I should say, and seeing the outside world for the first time in a while. And, I appreciate that a lot of the songs in this album are reflective like this and have a sense of regret or a sense of maturity, trying to move past old habits, even though, yeah, he did fall back into those old habits, but still, I do like that message that the album is putting out, and also the more ballady type songs I really do enjoy. I love how this band can incorporate many different types of style of music into their albums. Each Stone Temple Pilots album has their own unique sound. It's very distinct. You can't mistake a Stone Temple Pilots album for another Stone Temple Pilots album. And that's another thing I really do truly love about this band, and that's really why they're so high up in terms of my favorite 90s band. They're my second favorite 90s band, I should say. And that's a big reason why, because this band isn't afraid to try different things, and this album was very different compared to their previous work in a really, really good way, despite what most people try to tell you. Hot Space by Queen. Now, is this a weak Queen album? Yes. Can I understand the hate for this album? Yes, but I can't help but find this album to be a guilty pleasure of mine. I understand it's Queen trying to maintain their relevancy by adopting a more commercial sound and making a dance album, quote unquote, even if a lot of the songs on this album don't exactly follow the dance quota that this album was branded to have. But songs like Staying Power and Dancer and Calling All Girls, which are pretty neat little catchy songs that are fun to dance to, I'm sure, I honestly really do enjoy. I come back to those songs sometimes, mostly when I feel like listening to the album in full, or at the very least listening to the songs that I have downloaded off of this album. And, there are genuinely good songs off this album, like Life is Real, a song for Lennon, which, take a wild guess who that song was written for. And, of course, the collaboration between the band and David Bowie, Under Pressure. Everyone knows this song. Come the fuck on. Even if you don't recognize it by name, you definitely heard it. The moment you hear the song, the do-do-do-do-do-do part, you definitely will recognize it, or you may recognize it from that shitty Vanilla Ice song that I hate so much. But, anyways, let me get my anger for that horrid fucking stealing aside. Anyway, I do enjoy this album, even if it is weak compared to many other Queen albums. I do personally enjoy it. And I like it more than some other 80s Queen albums, like A Kind of Magic and The Miracle. That may be blasphemous of me to say, I don't know, those aren't exactly loved albums either, but I'm sure the general consensus is they're better than Hot Space, but I really don't care if people take contention to that, it's my opinion. So, yeah, whatever. If you're mad about it, you're mad about it. I can't help you with that. And while we're discussing Queen, Radio Gaga off of Queen's 1984 album, The Works. Now, The Works is a little better than Hot Space. It has its fair share of duds, but it also has some gems as well, and I believe Radio Gaga is among one of those gems. Now I know Radio Gaga was a huge hit for Queen. It is one of their most remembered songs, and so many people really do genuinely like this song, but I've also seen quite a few people shit on the song, especially within the Queen subreddit. A lot of people say this is among one of their worst singles ever, and I'm really inclined to disagree. It has a very loud, proud, anthemic feel to it, especially in the verses and pre-choruses, especially when Freddie is yelling, "You had your time, you had your power, you've yet to have your finest hour." I love that part of the song so much. And the chorus, yeah, is admittedly kind of weak. All we hear is Radio Gaga, Radio Goo Goo, Radio Gaga. Yeah, it's kind of stupid, but God damn it, I still really like the song. It's very fun and enjoyable. At the very least, can we agree that the Live Aid version of the song is fucking excellent? I think it's even better than the studio version. If you don't like the studio version of the song, check out the Live Aid version. It's not that much different, but with Freddie belting out in front of the crowd, especially when he's belting out those lines, it just feels all the more powerful, and I love it so goddamn much. Hours by David Bowie. Now, let me preface this with saying, this past year I have listened to David Bowie's whole entire discography, and I love his discography so much. He is among one of my favorite artists of all time now. Jesus Christ, I was really missing out. And you too are missing out as well if you haven't listened to any of David Bowie's albums or have heard some of his albums and never actually gave his whole discography a listen. Trust me, there's so many gems within his near 50-year discography. My God. But anyways, this album, I usually see either at the very, very bottom or near the very bottom of a lot of David Bowie albums ranked list. And considering the competition it's up against, yeah, I really don't blame people for putting this towards the bottom. But honestly, this album, I do actually really enjoy. It's nice and laid back, and that's a criticism a lot of people seem to have with this album. A lot of people say it's too laid back, it's very boring, even though there's some songs that actually are more energetic. But I think the main contention people have with this album is it came off the heels of some of David Bowie's most experimental albums. Outside, which was a very long industrial concept album, and it was definitely very new territory for David Bowie. It does not sound anything like a David Bowie album. And same with its follow-up, Earthling, which was also very industrial, but was also very energetic and loud and fun and, hyper compared to the very dark and ominous predecessor that was Outside. And this was just kind of laid back and sounded nothing like the previous two, and I think that's perfectly acceptable when you have two of some of your most ambitious works within your discography. I think you kind of have the right to have at least an album that's at least more laid back and playing it safe a little more compared to your other two previous works. I'm completely fine with that, and plus this song has some absolute gems like Thursday's Child and New Angels of Promise and The Dreamers, and my absolute favorite, If I'm Dreaming All My Life. That is one of my favorite 90s David Bowie songs, by the way. I love that song so goddamn much. And it explores themes like aging. David Bowie was middle-aged by the time he made this album, and a lot of this album explores, like I said, aging and mortality and, things like that. And I assume David was also not so keen on this album because the follow-up to this album, the far superior Heathen, that is one of my favorite David Bowie albums of all time. What an excellent album Heathen was. But Heathen also explored many of the same themes that this album explored, even better, and I feel like he probably thought, yeah, I could probably do better than this, so he decided to make up for it with Heathen. But even still, this album is good enough. It gets a pass for me, and I really do genuinely enjoy it. Despite what many fans say about it, I don't think it's boring. I don't think it's too laid back. I think it is a perfectly fine album. And while I'm still talking about David Bowie's cover of Across the Universe by the Beatles off of his 1975 album Young Americans, which was admittedly a grower on me. I wasn't too keen on the Young Americans album when I first listened to it because I'm not into soul music all that much, but as I listen to it more and more, I've grown to really, really enjoy this album. It really does make me appreciate all the different styles and genres that David Bowie decided to take on throughout his career. But anyways, that aside, I do personally enjoy his cover of Across the Universe. Now, is it better than the original? No, but I do really like the different approach David took with this song. Unlike John Lennon's more quiet, reserved vocal delivery on the original, David decides to just belt out a lot of the lines in the song, and it honestly sounds really beautiful to me. And I also really like the drums on this song, the drums that were incorporated into this track. It's pretty different from the original. It's still retains a lot of what made the original great, but I think David really does build upon it. Again, I don't think it's better than the original per se, but I think it really is close, and a lot of people just seem to really despise this cover and say it is easily the worst song off of this album. I really do heavily disagree with that, by the way. Fame. Anyways. A lot of people say it's the worst song of this album, one of the worst songs ever in David Bowie's discography. I get it, David Bowie's covers were kind of wishy-washy. He was pretty hit or miss when it came to covers. He did a lot of those throughout his career, and I think he's done his fair share of abysmal covers, like, say, Let's Spend the Night Together by the Rolling Stones. I fucking hate that cover. Easily the worst song off of Aladdin Sane, by the way, which is otherwise a fantastic album through and through when you take that song out of the equation. But, I think this is among one of his hits when it comes to his covers. I don't understand the hate for this cover for the life of me, man. One in a Million by Guns N' Roses off of their 1987 EP Lies. Now, let me get out of the way, for those of you who are familiar with this song and the controversy surrounding this song and the frankly yikesy lyrics, I do not blame anyone for not liking this song. It is highly offensive. The lyrics are very, very racist. Even if Axl was supposedly playing a character when he wrote and sang this song. Regardless, I can understand why people really don't like this song. And I personally really don't like the lyrics myself, and I think Axl has personally expressed regret for this song, which, thumbs up to that. But regardless, take the lyrics out of the equation. I love the instrumental. It is a beautiful, beautiful song instrumentally. And despite the, again, very, very offensive lyrics, it is my favorite song off of this EP. Very, very close second to Patience. It's kind of sad that a instrumentally beautiful song ended up with lyrics like the lyrics you hear in this song, which I'm not going to read out. You can read it for yourselves. It contains a bunch of slurs that I'd rather not say here in this video for a multitude of different reasons. Again, you can look it up for yourselves and you'll be like, yeah, I can totally see why a lot of people take contention with this song, unless you're a racist, of course. But anyways, politics aside, I do genuinely enjoy the song for the instrumentals and not the lyrics. I'm not going to put up too much of a defense for this song because, like I made perfectly clear, I can totally understand the most out of all of the songs and albums I mentioned here why people really don't like this particular song. Fallen by Evanescence. Evanescence is a band that isn't exactly looked back upon too well after the early 2000s. If you never heard of this band, you definitely heard their song Bring Me to Life. The moment you hear those opening piano chords, you'll be like, oh yeah, that song, that's in a lot of memes and such. And Evanescence is kind of sort of a meme band at this point, in kind of the bad sense. I hear Bring Me to Life played in a lot of meme videos in regards to, like, people want to be edgy, try-hard kids, Kind of similar to how a lot of Linkin Park songs were used for that, but that has since seemed to have fizzled out since Chester Bennington's death. Rest in peace, Chester. But regardless, memes aside, I think this is actually a great album. It kind of reeks of early 2000s edgy new metal, but I like it. It's definitely very, very different compared to a lot of bands of that similar ilk were doing at the time. There's a lot of piano ballads in this. My personal favorite song on this album is My Immortal. Very, very deep song, and plus, Amy Lee, the front woman of the band and the woman on this cover, has a gorgeous, gorgeous voice. I think her voice is impeccable for both hard metal type songs and for slower ballady type songs, and you can't say that a lot for a lot of vocalists. However, this is really the only Evanescence album I like. Nothing else they made after this really enticed me. I like some songs off of their follow-up, and that's really about it. And then the albums after that are kind of sort of trash. So yeah, this is really the only Evanescence album I go back to and listen to front to back sometimes, so yeah. keep ragging on this band all you want for their quote-unquote edginess. I'm going to keep unironically listening to them and enjoying them, and there's nothing you can say that will make me think this band is anything short of great, at least with this album. Cold Spring Harbor by Billy Joel. Alongside David Bowie, Billy Joel is an artist that I got heavily into this past year. I listened to his entire discography, front to back, and I really do enjoy it. I don't enjoy every single album, and I don't enjoy him on the same level as I enjoy David Bowie, but he's definitely my favorite piano man in music, even above Elton John, who I could never really fully get into, but I so much prefer Billy Joel's music over Elton John, sorry. Anyways, this is his debut album, like I mentioned earlier, and even Billy himself looks back at this album with vitriol, and this isn't exactly a fan favorite, but I'm here to say I love this album. Now, this album ran across many problems during its production. Billy recorded with some independent with some independent label at the time, and something fucked up in the production, and the pitch is higher than it should have been. But on streaming services, you can download the corrected version of the album, which isn't just an album that has the pitch corrected. There were certain instruments added in certain songs. Some instrumentals were taken out, and some songs are completely stripped of all the other instruments that were played in the song. So it's just Billy Joel singing and his piano playing, which I think actually improves certain songs. I even listened to some of the higher pitched versions, the original version of the album, and yeah, it was definitely corrected for the better. But since the album ran across all of those problems and all of that, just probably shying people away from this album and causing even Billy himself to not like this album. He doesn't even like some of the lyrics he wrote in this album. He thought he definitely grew as an artist over time, which is certainly true, but this album still has some of my all-time favorite Billy Joel songs, including Tomorrow Is Today, which is basically Billy Joel's suicide note that he wrote prior to recording this album. He actually did attempt suicide before actually jump-starting his career. Fun fact about that, about him. And it's actually my favorite Billy Joel song of all time. All the emotion in that song, it is just so beautiful. Another favorite of mine is Got to Begin Again, and some of you may recognize some lyrics from this song because I posted lyrics to this song under the in the comments to the video of me talking about my cat Debbie's death. I listened to that song a lot that day because that song, I don't exactly know what the song is about, but it strongly hints to death, so I figured, this song is perfect for this day because I lost someone who was close to me. So, yeah, that's kind of morbid, but that aside, I still think this is a great album with some really, really great songs. Some songs, yeah, teetered towards the mediocre side, but I can look past that. It's not like this album has any huge stinkers or anything like some of his late 80s albums have. Ugh. So, yeah, this is still one of my favorite Billy Joel albums of all time, despite what many fans say, and despite what Billy Joel himself says about this album. Viva La Vida and Death to All His Friends by Coldplay. Now, I could put any Coldplay album in this video, and I don't think there would be any objections from anyone. But I do actually like Coldplay. I know they're definitely up there with Nickelback in terms of bands that are cool to hate, but I like most of the cool to hate bands, so bite me. Anyways, I think this is a great album. It's not exactly on the same level as the three albums that preceded it, but I think it's better than what most people think, and, there's a lot of people who say, I miss the old Coldplay. Old Coldplay was so amazing. I still like some of their more later period albums, not every single song, but I enjoy their later period stuff, but a lot of people say this is the album where Coldplay started to fall off, where they started to abandon the sound that made them, that made their previous music so good. And I heavily, heavily disagree with that. This is a more ambitious album, definitely their most ambitious compared to all the stuff that came before this and all the stuff that followed this. And sure, say all you want, the lead single, the title track is is overplayed to death. It's so annoying. I like that song, but I can definitely see where people are coming from. But I feel thanks to that, a lot of people tend to write off this album, and I think it is a legitimately good album for the reasons I stated. It is ambitious. Coldplay entered new territory that they weren't exactly familiar with, and I think they nailed it out of the park with a lot of songs. And my absolute favorite song of this album is a song called Violet Hill. It is unlike a lot of other Coldplay songs. It is angry, aggressive, very anti-war lyrics, and when I first heard the song, I was like, this is a Coldplay song? It is so different from what people stereotype this band being, soft, pussy, and this is an angry, aggressive song with very angry, aggressive lyrics. So now, don't expect metal or anything if you're curious to check the song out, but it definitely doesn't follow the stereotypes that people like to place with Coldplay. I'd say this is my third favorite Coldplay album. A Rush of Blood to the Head is number one and Parachutes is number two. Both of those are really, really great albums, but this is a strong third. There is some mediocre tracks here, sure, some tracks that I don't exactly care for, but when this album nails it, this album really, really nails it. Straight Lines by the band Silverchair off of their 2007 album Young Modern, which is ultimately probably their final album as they have released nothing since then, and the band says they're on indefinite hiatus, but they haven't played any shows since 2011, so it's kind of safe to assume they're actually broken up, even though they don't want to say they're broken up. But anyways, this band is kind of interesting. A few years ago, a friend of mine, an online friend of mine, got me into this band because I think they accidentally came across one of their songs, which is a song called Anthem for the Year 2000. I was like, this song is kind of sick. And a few years later, I decided to listen to this band's discography. All the albums before this were either great or just good. Their first three albums were great, their third being my absolute favorite, and their fourth was just good. It had some songs that I didn't exactly care for. But overall, it was still an enjoyable album. But then I got to this album, and it is a pile of dog shit. Aside from the song that I put in this video, and one other song, which is the title track, which is a good song. I don't exactly have too much to say about it though. But this song was the lead single off of this album, and I actually kind of enjoy it. It is a lot more poppier than their early stuff. Fun fact about this band, they started at the age of 14, I believe. That's when they released their debut album, which is pretty much a stereotypical grunge album. Nothing too out of the ordinary about the album within the grunge sphere. But they were actually a really good band. The only band I could say that was comprised of teenagers that I actually like. And, their follow-up was also great, and then they released their third album, which was also great, and their fourth, which was good. But, I can kind of respect the band for dramatically changing their sound in this album, even though their third album, there was definitely a shift in sound, and it was still good. I can understand not wanting to play the same kind of music you were playing at the age of 14, but this album just ain't it. But the song Straight Lines gets a really bad rap. I think it is an enjoyable song. And a lot of people make fun of the video because the lead singer looks gay in it, which he denies that he's gay, so there's that. But if he really is gay, so the fuck what? Why are you making fun of the guy just for his sexual preference? Whatever. It is absolutely nothing like what made this band popular in the 90s, but you know what? I'm fine with it being very different, and if the rest of the album was like this song and very poppy but still enjoyable, I would be able to actually digest this album and not be part of the hate bandwagon for this album and say, why isn't Silverchair exactly the same? Why aren't they playing the same exact music they played when they were teenagers and now they're like in their fucking 30s? Why can't they be exactly the same? I understand, people mature, they want to change their sound, especially if they started their band and they were fucking teenagers, but still, my god, this album, like I said, it just ain't it. Ugh. But Straight Lines gets a pass for me. The Future Scope trilogy off of Weezer's 2014 album, Everything Will Be Alright in the End. Now, I know what some of you may be thinking or already typing. Weezer sucks! Weezer sucks! Why do you listen to Weezer? They suck! You suck! Sorry, I had to get my virgin Weezer fan rage out there for a second. Anyway, A lot of people rag on this trilogy. It's at the very end of the album. A lot of people say their song Foolish Fathers should have been the end of this album because it is just a perfect ending for this album. And this little trilogy that is placed at the very end of this album kind of ruins the song's momentum and its feeling of finality. And I'm inclined to disagree. Now, I'll be honest, I kind of sort of do sometimes forget that this trilogy exists, and I tend to think that this album does actually end with Foolish Father, and maybe I would kind of sort of prefer that the album did end with Foolish Father, because it just feels so much like an album closer, and the song is legitimately excellent, easily the best off of the album. But I like this little trilogy, especially the third part with Rivers shredding. Oh my god, that was so fucking good. I think it ends the album off pretty well, and it does have a sense of finality to it, and I don't mind it existing. I don't spit on it and think that it completely ruins Foolish Fathers' momentum like quite a few people seem to think. Oh, the album should have ended with Foolish Father. What is wrong with this trilogy? It ends off the album perfectly fine. It's big, it's grand, it's epic, it has all the positive qualities that a closing track on an album should have. I don't really understand the hate behind it. Not exactly hate, just people saying, it's a good track, but it should have just been left on the cutting room floor. Fuck that noise. Pop by U2. U2 is yet another one of those bands that are really cool to hate, and I'll never understand the hate behind, but oh well. Pop is an album I rather enjoyed. Now, a lot of people really don't like this album, including actual fans of the band, for its, well, big shocker, poppier sound. And I actually don't mind it. There's quite a few tracks here that I really enjoy. Discotheque is a really fun song, despite it being very poppy and very far and away from what the band usually does. It's still a great song regardless, and I think a lot of people are inclined to agree. I think a lot of people actually do enjoy this song. They say this is one of the highlights, but the rest of the songs, fuck those songs. But there's other great songs here too, like If God Will Send His Angels. Very religious song, despite me being an atheist, but I still really like the song. Staring at the Sun is another highlight of the album, and I actually have a lot of memories surrounding this song, because this is one of the first U2 songs I've heard, actually, because my father had the song booted. My father had the song on his computer way back when, and I used to use his computer a lot to listen to music and such as a little kid. That was a lot of fun. But I think my favorite off this album is Wake Up Dead Man, a very slow, haunting song that I think is a very excellent closer for this album. Like, a lot of this album is very, hyper and fast and poppy, and, a lot of these songs you could go to the dance floor and dance to, but this song is just slow, like I said, and haunting, and very unlike a lot of the other songs in this album, but it just fits so beautifully, and is just a great closer for this album. For me, this album is a great example of a band doing something drastically different with their sound, but still nailing it out of the park regardless. The Weirdness by the Stooges. Now, Iggy Pop is yet another artist that I got into in 2019. Not as much as, say, Billy Joel or David Bowie, but I still rather enjoy a bulk of his solo stuff, and especially the Stooges stuff. Oh my god, the Stooges' first three albums are phenomenal, and this album is almost universally hated. Now, this is the Stooges' comeback album, the first album they released since the early 70s, and this came out in 2007, and I've seen this on a lot of worst comeback album lists, and yeah, this is noticeably weaker than their earlier stuff, but I mean, do you really expect them to top their first three albums that were just so phenomenal? Like, it's very rare when a band hits it out of the park that much, three albums in a row. I mean, do you really expect an over 30-year hiatus, after a over 30-year hiatus, for them to reach the same level as those three albums? Anyway, I think this is still a competent album. It's not great by any means, but nothing too awful. If you separate this from the Stooges' first three albums, it's pretty run-of-the-mill. I mean, of course, if you're going to compare it to the first three, you're going to be severely disappointed. And I feel like the band kind of knew that this album wouldn't receive the best reception, especially since this album opens up with a song called Trollin'. Now, this is early 2007, so I really don't think that they're referencing the internet usage of Trollin', but who knows? Maybe they're actually, at least Iggy Pop, who wrote the lyrics to these songs, were in touch with the internet culture at the time, and it was a little wink wink, nudge nudge to that. I mean, I'm kind of in the middle because of lyrics like this. Rock critics wouldn't like this at all. I guess my faith is riding my balls. And you can't tell me this is not a suave thing to do. You can't tell me because I know you do it too. I'm trolling. I take this as the band saying, yeah, we know you're probably going to be disappointed with this, but we're fucking back anyway, and you better like it because we are here to stay, and we're making music, new music, whether you like it or not. And I kind of like that attitude. Does this album have its share of bad songs? Yes. I'm not. Again, this album is not a masterpiece by any means, but there's still some songs I rather enjoy, like like the opening song that I mentioned, Trollin', and also I like the title track, which is probably my favorite on the album. I would say this is an okay comeback album. It's nothing that blew me out of the water, of course, but when you compare this to the first three Stooges album, anything they put out after that is bound to disappoint, because when you set the bar that high, it's nearly impossible, especially when you did it 3 times, it's nearly impossible to reach the same level over 30 years later after being apart. So, because of that, and plus, I do actually enjoy quite a few songs off this album. This album gets a pass for me, and I'm cutting it some slack. So that concludes part 2 of hated albums and songs that I personally enjoy, but many people hate. And if you haven't heard some of these songs and albums, I encourage you to give them a try. Maybe you'll be pleasantly surprised and you'll be in my camp and think, wow, he's right. Why do so many people hate this? Or maybe you'll just join the mob and be like, how can he like this? Ugh, that was so awful. Whatever, anyway. I've been thinking of maybe doing the opposite of this, making a big video listing out songs that I personally don't enjoy that many people do. When will that be out? I don't know. But, yeah. I may have left out some stuff that I would love to talk about in a third video that I probably will do sometime in the future. Maybe it'll take me another 2 years to make. I don't know. But for now, I don't have a whole lot of other songs that I personally like that a lot of people hate, so I'll just kind of wait for that to pile up as I get into more artists, because there are other artists that I am interested in hearing, and I'm sure there will be... I'll come across songs and albums that are considered stinkers, and I'll be like, is this really that bad? Really? People hate this? Anyway. But here is one thing we can all agree on. Music is awesome. Unless you have mellophobia, then you wouldn't agree with that, which, by the way, is the fear of music. I just learned about that phobia like a week or two ago, and I was like, holy shit, people... There are actually some people out there with the phobia of music. Jesus Christ, I feel so bad for them. So, if you never heard of that, congratulations, I just taught you something new. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Bye-bye.